We're going to get started in a new chapter today. We are in chapter 3, and in chapter 3, we're going to be looking at the nature of logic. And so this is going to be very different, but I think that you'll find it to be interesting. So let's look at section 3.1. In section 3.1, we start out by looking at logic statements. Now, a statement is something that can be validated as either true or false. So let's look at a few of these statements here. So I've got you 3 statements. First one is, I am a preacher's wife. Now, that is a statement, actually a true statement. So now the next one, that church is beautiful. That cannot be validated as true or false because that is kind of an opinion. And so that would not be a good example of a statement. And then the last one here, Miss Baker is the best math teacher in the world. Now, that also is a matter of opinion, but it is true, of course. So, true, but not a statement. All right, so now let's look at what we can do with these statements. Okay, so let's take 2 statements that pertain to me that are true, and we're going to see what we can do with connecting them with different operations. So we're going to let P be the statement, I'm a preacher's wife, and we're going to let Q be the statement, I'm a teacher. And we are going to look at both of these true statements, and we are going to combine them with the word and that's a very important joining. So we're going to look at this word and if you see this carrot top symbol is how we symbolize the word and. So you're going to need to be familiar with that and know that the word and this symbol go together. All right, so we are going to form a table over here, and these are called truth tables. They're going to be very helpful to you whenever we're going through this chapter. So let's construct this truth table, and there are actually 4 different ways that we can look at a combination of P and Q. So the first one is to just put them together and say, I am a preacher's wife and I am a teacher. Well, both of those statements are true, which means that when you combine them, you get a true statement. So we can add the truths to our truth table. So both P and Q are true, which means P and Q is true. Now let's change it up a little bit. Let's say we have the true statement, I'm a preacher's wife, and then the false statement, and I am not a teacher. So that's false. So when you put that together, I'm a preacher's wife and I am not a teacher, well, that's not true because I am a teacher. So when you combine those things, you get a false statement. So in my truth table, I get true, false, false. Okay, now let's change it up a little bit more. What if we said, I am not a preacher's wife and I am a teacher? Well, I am a preacher's wife. So that statement is false, which means that when I combine them all together, because we use that word and, there's no way that that can be true. So we have a false, true, and a false. Okay, now last one, I am not a preacher's wife and I am not a teacher. So those statements are both false, which leads you to a false joining there with the word and. And so you have false, false, and false. Okay, now the most important part of this is that you can remember when you're using the word and to join 2 statements that the only time it is true is when both statements are true. So every other time it's going to be false. So if both P and Q are true and you are joining them with and, then you get a true statement. The rest of the time you're going to get false. Okay. Now, we're going to look at another same statements. So here I have the same statements except that I changed the word and to or. And notice that it has a different symbol. So it has a V symbol there. So it's the upside down of the other one. So now when you say or, it changes the entire meaning. All right, so we look here when it says I'm a preacher's wife or I am a teacher. Well, that's true. And so we can add that to our truth statement table. Now, what about I am a preacher's wife or I am not a teacher? Well, that statement is also true because The first part of it, I am a preacher's wife, is true, but it says, or I'm not a teacher. So, yeah, well, I am a preacher's wife, so it's okay. That part is true. Now, the next way, I am not a preacher's wife, or I am a teacher. Well, that is also true because I am a teacher. So that works. And then the last statement, I'm not a preacher's wife or I am not a teacher. Now, both of those statements are false. Okay, so that is going to lead me to a false. So now the important part of this truth table is that you know that when you use or to join these statements, the only time you can get a false statement when joining is going to be when both P and Q are both false. The rest of the time it's true. So, so kind of two separate looking tables, but hopefully you got that answer there. So let's look at some examples. So we are going to look at several ways of joining P and Q together. Okay, so the first one, and this is just kind of a recap, is let's look at P, and do you remember what this means? Is it and or? It is and. Okay, so remember and so in this case, I'm telling you P is true, Q is false. So the first thing that I do whenever I have a statement is I substitute false and true in for the P and Q. So that is because P was true, I put a T, and because Q is false, I put an F. Now remember back to that truth statement, the truth table. Remember with and, the only way that you can get a true statement is if they're both true. So in this case, this is going to be false. All right, let's get another one. Now, we have a new symbol that we're introducing here. This little tilde is not. So this is not P, which means it's the opposite of P. So if you think about that, if P is true, then not P is going to be false. So we're going to get false here. We're going to substitute false in for Q. Now we're going to look at this statement. Remember what happens when you do false and false. So think about that for a second. What do you think that's going to be? Okay, hopefully you got that that is also false. Okay, let's look at another one. All right, so let's read this one. We have P. This is or, not Q. All right, so I want you to go ahead and write down what that would be. P or, not Q. Substitute in the true and false. All right, so hopefully you got that that is true or true. And the reason is because not Q would be not false, which is true. Now, true or true is going to give you a true statement. All right. And then finally, let's look at not P or not Q. Again, I'm going to substitute in the values for true and false. So not P would be false, and not Q would be true. So then you have false or true. And you remember that that would actually be a true statement. Okay, these just get uglier, so I'm going to go ahead and apologize now before I go on to the next slide, because they are about to get very detailed and very ugly, but you just kind of take it one step at a time. Okay, now I'm adding three things. So we're going to look at P, Q, and R. So we have P is false, Q is true, and R is false. Okay, now we're going to look at, just take a deep breath. Okay, we're going to look at this statement here. Now notice on this statement, I've got some parentheses. This is order of operations, and you are going to maintain the order of operations, which means you're going to combine those first, and then see what happens whenever you combine that with this R. All right, so the first step is exactly the same as last step. I just substitute true and false in for all these PQs and Rs because it's just too confusing to look at PQ and R. All right, so I just substituted those values in. P is false, Q is true, R is false. All right, now I've got to do this parentheses first, okay? So false or true. Now false or true, since it's or, let's think about it. That should be true. Okay, so all I did was do one step at a time. So I did false or true becomes true. And then now I'm combining it with this and false. All right, now true and false. Remember that the only way that you can have a true statement with an and is if they're both true. So this is actually false. Okay, I'm sorry. I know this is not fun, but we just have to grin and bear it. Okay, now let's look at another one. Substitute the false and trues in. That's always the first step. So I'm going to go straight and substitute in. P is false, Q is true, R was false, so not R would be true. Okay, so notice that I went ahead and said not R is actually true. All right, now you're going to do the exact same thing that we just did. So false and true, I'm going to do that next. That is going to give me false. And then I'm going to combine these two together and I will get false. All right, so hopefully you're doing okay with this. Let's do the last one on this slide. I'm telling you, they just get uglier. So, okay, so now we got several things. Again, take it one step at a time, substitute your values in. So I'm going to substitute all my falses and trues. So P is false, Q is true, R is false, not Q would be false. All right, now I have two sets of parentheses. Okay, so I'm going to have to do what's inside of both of these sets. I have to do those first. All right, false or true. That is going to be true. False and false. That is going to be false. Okay, so you have true and false. When you combine true and false, you get a false. All right, one more slide. We can do this. Okay, and it's about to get really, really ugly. But just two more examples and we're done. Almost done. All right, so here you have this really ugly statement. And we're going to do the same thing we did before, substitute values in. So notice here that I have a not P. Okay, that's just confusing. So I'm going to work the inside out. So not P would be true. Okay, and then I substituted these values. Now I'm going to go ahead and say what is not true. Well, that would be false. And then I went ahead and did false or true is true. Now you combine these two together and you get that the final answer is false. Seems like everything is false. It doesn't always work out that way, but it's a 50-50 shot if you decide to guess. So, you know, can't go too wrong there. All right, so now I know this is like the queen of ugliness here. There are lots of things going on here. Just take them one step at a time and let's go ahead and substitute values. Okay, so I've got all my falses and trues in here. Now you've got a lot of things going on. First of all, you've got this one set, you've got two sets of parentheses, three sets of parentheses, but then we're joining this outer set, and so that's four sets of parentheses. You've got to use your order of operations. Okay, so I'm going to do all of these three in the next step, but I'm going to keep my outside brackets in there. All right, so we go to the next step and we get false, false and true, make false. False and false, make false. False and true, make false. So look at all these falses I have here. But now, because of these brackets, I have to combine these two, which if you combine false or false, you get false. And now we're going to combine these two, and what do you know? My answer is yet again false. Maybe I should have chose better examples. Anyway, hopefully this will help you with your homework. I think that it will. You have several statements like this. To get through this section, just write everything down, take it one step at a time, write out those truth tables from the first couple of slides, and if you just have those off to the side, they will help you get through this. So hopefully that will get you through section 3.1.